Hey, welcome to lesson 8. Now, I've jumped the gun a bit. I've gone straight to the page, so you're going to have to go up to the contents page, find lesson 8, highlight it, sign and date it, proceed down. Now, gender and sexuality. This is a very contemporary topic, you can say. Now, in the syllabus, they are separated, but we're going to do them in one lesson because a lot of the time they naturally go hand in hand. We've got a lot of cool stuff that we are going to look at today. Some very fun things, some very interesting gender stereotypes and cultural stereotypes, I guess, for lack of a synonym there, from back in the 50s to now. So, gender. We did a definition of gender last topic, but just to recap, gender is the socially constructed differences between males and females. According to our syllabus, that's the wording that they use there. So we go off that, socially constructed differences between males and females. So we need to stress that gender and sex are different. So gender is not your biological or anatomical bits. That is indeed your sex. Okay, so your sex is your anatomical and biological bits that you're born with, whereas your gender is how you identify, and that closely links to your identity. And gender, for most people, is very much linked to their sexuality as well. The idea that the social construct of gender influences what you find desirable and attractive in sexual partners has been true across time. So, complete that word bank as a bit of a revision on the concept of gender. In terms of how it impacts your identity, I know you guys are probably going to be all over this, but to do this, I've written a little activity here. So I want you to do, whatever time of the day you do this, I mean, if you do it right in the morning before school, you're probably going to struggle to get a few things in. So maybe do it towards the end of your day or after school or midway through school. And I want you to list all the decisions, and I want you to really think back every single decision you have made today up until this very point that has been based on the social constructs of your gender, what society says your gender role has, and the behaviours and norms associated with such. So, for example, and I just want you to list them in here. So, for example, first one that influences me as soon as I wake up is the clothes that I put on. So how I dress myself is very much based on the social constructions surrounding my gender. So when I wake up of a morning, I will get dressed. I will probably put on, say if I'm going to work, a collared shirt, pants and a belt. I'm going to wear clothes that society sort of deems acceptable for a male. So if I got up and put on a dress, generally speaking, society, that does not reflect the gender roles of a man, so I would not wear that. So vice versa, girls, when you guys are waking up, you're likely to put on the school uniform that has been assigned to girls, so the skirt and shirt. Now, given your shirt, you girls most of you have the rounded collars, whereas the blokes in the room will have the pointed collars. So again, clothes and dress is probably one that's going to be up there for a lot of people. And then even other things. So what do you do after you get dressed? Do you have a shower, right? After you get dressed, you have a shower. Wrong order. So say the... Sorry, that's really, really bad. You can shower with your clothes on. They'll just get wet and it'll be very annoying and you'll have to change afterwards. Would not recommend. Definitely shower naked. So what I meant to say is that whilst you are showering, even a lot of think real basics. So like a lot of the products that you may use in the shower. So for me, when I'm shaving, I do shave. It takes a few weeks to grow, but then I can shave the face. The razor I use is a man razor. The shaving cream I'm using is designed for men. Your shampoos and conditioners designed for men. Am I, as a male, more likely to buy the pink strawberry scented body wash, or am I going to buy like the cinnamon manly black tube of shower gel? Even what they call it, mine's like shower gel, and the females might be rejuvenating skin lotion or whatever it is, right? So think of even all those decisions that have to do with the gender constructions there, okay? Even think of the activities. What type of music are you putting on in the car? Is that related to gender in any way? Is the type of car you're driving? Is who's driving you to school? You know, is it mum or dad? Is dad working? Is mum at home? You know what I mean? So try to really think of every single decision that you can, and think of how that's related to your gender. Okay, so pause, do that activity, fill up the table, check with people around you, because they might have some ideas that you haven't thought of. Okay, beautiful. All right, now that you've done that activity, I've got we're going to do a bit of a content analysis here. So all of these are little excerpts from an article that featured in a women's magazine called McCallus in 1959. Okay, so it's about 70-ish years ago, 72 years ago. And the title of this article was called 129 Ways to Get a Husband. Now, it's got a lot of different subsections here. What I want you to do, it's a real hoot, is read through all of them, and I want you to really think about, whilst you're doing this, applying the concept of continuity and change. So, as you're reading it, do we still hold a lot of these social constructs and stereotypes surrounding the role of women in society? And a lot of this relates to sexuality as well, because the idea here is they're assuming that the woman within this article is only interested in men. Okay, so all these tips are related to the sexuality, and assuming that if you are a woman and you identify as such as your gender, then naturally you have to have the sexuality that is heterosexual, which we know is not the case for everyone. So what they've done here is they've written 129 tips. So what they did, they sat down with a group of women, the publisher of this magazine, and asked them how to get a husband, and they had blokes on board as well to give them tips. I'm going to read out a few for you. I'm not going to read them all, but I want you to read them all because they're all quite funny. But there are even things like, look, number 5. Look in the census reports for places with the most single men. Nevada has 125 males for every 100 females. So the idea is that you're going to have more boys to pick from. Here's some tips to find them. Be friendly to ugly men. Handsome is as handsome does. It's nice, isn't it? Don't room with a girl who is a sad sack and let her pull you down to her level. I like this one, number 34. Wear a Band-Aid. People always ask what happened. So if you're really struggling to find a bloke, ladies, wear a Band-Aid. They'll ask what's happened, and you'll fall in love before you know it. Stand in a corner and cry softly. Chances are good that he'll come over to find out what's wrong. And then boom, next thing you're married, having kids. According to this magazine, that's what people did back then. And I guess we can see these stereotypes reflected throughout. It's quite intense now that you think about it. So even things like, take good care of your health. Men don't like girls who are ill. Get a sunburn. Notice they call it sunburn back then. Don't be too fussy. You're not allowed to know what you want in a man or a sexual partner. Don't be too fussy. Get what you're given. Double date with a gay, happily married couple. Let him see what it's like. So the idea there, when we're looking at the word gay, here is a synonym for happy back in the 50s and 60s. So that doesn't mean double date with a homosexual gay or lesbian relationship couple. That is saying double date with a happily married couple, essentially. Just thought I'd point that one out there for you. Be flexible. Don't discuss your former boyfriends. Learn to play poker. If he's rich, tell him you like his money. The honesty will intrigue him. Now, some of the funniest ones are the wild ideas. Anything goes. So if your mother's fat, tell him you take after your father. And if he's fat too, tell him you're adopted. He won't question your body shape then, apparently. There's one about writing something on the roof of your car. Oh, yeah, here we go. Paint your name and number on a roof and say, "Give me a buzz, pilots." That is just absolutely probably the best idea you could ever think of, in my mind. And now here's where it gets a little bit weird, and what we would say is probably not safe practice, but even things like, ask strange, handsome men if they would mind snapping your picture. Probably wouldn't do that. Anyway, read through these. Once you have done that, on each page, here's what I want you to do, okay? Is you've got a bit of space around here. What I want you to do is, as you're reading them, I don't want you to explain why, because we'll discuss it in class, but I want you to write the number of any suggestion in this magazine that you still think is a social gender construction today. So, for example, if you think the idea that don't take a job in a company run by women is, I guess, a social agenda construct that would happen today, I just want you to write the number here. Or alternatively, you guys can highlight them. But I just want you to sort of think about, do you think a lot of these social constructs still exist today? A lot of them you might not think they do. So even 45, the idea, do you think that all girls should be or are expected to laugh at a guy's jokes? You know what I mean? So, and it'd be interesting to see how many of these constructs we think still exist over time, or if they've changed. Okay? So that's that. Now with sexuality. So pause that, do that activity and then come back. And remember, don't marry him if he has too many loose buttons. That's both to be taken literally and metaphorically. All right, sexuality. The idea of your sexuality is, it's something that we call a nature. So it's generally something you are born with. It's not something like, say, a belief or value that can be taught to you over time. Most people feel their sexuality is something that they're born with. Okay, so whether that's heterosexual, homosexual, pansexual, bisexual, asexual even. So it's that sort of side of it, and your orientation, as we would say, your sexual orientation and who you're attracted to is you're born with, and usually that stays the same throughout the lifespan and life course of someone. It may change and become more diverse, or it may contrast over time. I've known that to happen to a few people in my meso and micro world, but for most people, generally it stays the same. The thing that is a social construct in regards to sexuality is the sexual behaviour that's learnt in regards to that. So the idea, have you guys probably heard the phrase, treat 'em mean, keep 'em keen? So that is a kind of, is the sexual behaviour or the social construct surrounding sexual beliefs and behaviours, that the idea that men should treat women, or even women treating men, depending on how you want to take it, with the idea that if you act not interest, they'll want to chase you, and in that chase, you'll end up falling in love. So you don't want to try too hard, because if you try too hard, the impression is that you're too easy, and people don't want to get in with someone who's easy, and you might come across as desperate or whatever it is, right? So these sexual behaviours are learnt, and they're permeated by culture. A lot of it through movies and TVs television that we watch. Massive amount of it through social media, especially little TikToks videos today. A lot of that's really, from what I'm seeing around the playground, is really developing a lot of sexual behaviour and ideas of what's considered attractive and not attractive. So even if we look at things like how girls were meant to dress in the 50s or 60s and what they deemed was really attractive versus now, and the idea that fashion flows and comes back and forth over time is a factor as well. But the idea that culture really does determine sexual behaviour and what is considered appropriate and not appropriate, and it also determines what people find attractive and not attractive. So the idea that, say, 70 years ago, you would wear a bikini to the beach that shows or has as little material as possible would be seen as promiscuous, and that would be seen in a negative light. That would be seen as adulterous and wrong and immoral. You can still wear a bikini, obviously, but the idea back in the 50s and 60s was that you'd be more modest, and people found modesty more attractive, whereas today you've got a mix of both. Some people find modesty attractive still, but other people and their sexual behaviour is to wear more revealing clothing. I'm not saying either's right or wrong. What I'm trying to point out is that sexual behaviour relating to sexuality changes because of culture and our beliefs around what we think is attractive versus not attractive. So yeah, there was that little bit there as well. In terms of when people become aware of their sexuality, and when you guys become aware of your sexuality, that is, again, a process that usually shapes through puberty. So at the start of puberty, you're starting to discover little things in your body that are changing and becoming different. Your body starts releasing chemical hormones and things like that. So that's why a lot of it, we say sexuality is very nature and you're born with it, because a lot of it's driven by hormones. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that can't change over time. It can. But most people become aware of it during puberty. But it may be before or it may be after, or you still might not be sure. Everything's fine. The idea as well with sexuality around sexual activity is also really shaped by culture. So I think what, and this is my personal view, with social media becoming more prominent and people having, I guess, pressure, and you guys having a pressure, I think, to be more mature at a younger age, it has resulted in a lot more sexual behaviour and activity at a younger age as well. And when you think about that, coupled with all the sexual content and saturation of sexual imagery in Western society, I mean, in every movie, in all the social media, different profiles of influencers, and a lot of the time they're very famous because of their sexual imagery and content. Even things like children's toys, which we'll look at in a second, is really promoting this idea of sexual behaviour from a very young age. So I think people are becoming a lot more aware of their sexuality earlier on because of those reasons. And I think there's a lot of different behaviours that are occurring as a result. There's other things as well. So like technology has really boosted the adult film industry around the world. And so a lot of people's first contact with sexual activity is through an online video and not necessarily with a real life person. So even the experiences and standards that people are growing up with is changing a lot. And, with videos online, what you see is a lot of times an unrealistic sexual standard, and it conveys sexuality and sexual behaviour that can really be seen as abusive and abnormal in real life and what most people encounter. So the whole idea of sexual behaviour is changing over time as well. But the flip side of that is that 40, 50 years ago, the idea of sex and talking about it was considered really taboo. And that can come with some damaging consequences as well, where people aren't freely able to explore their own sexuality. And because it's such a really core part of your identity, like we said, it's in our DNA, our hormones. Back then, if you weren't able to express that in a way that was right for you, that would have been very hard. And so the idea that we're more open about sexuality now has a lot of really healthy consequences. So we can see celebrations of that through things like the Mardi Gras, like the legislation of gay marriage. But then the flip side of that was what we were talking about before, how things like TikTok, social media, and the porn industry can really be distorting and over-sexualizing us to some degree, which comes with its own set of problems. So, yeah, in a nutshell, our sexuality and sexual orientation you're born with, but the idea of sexual behaviour is very much dependent on the culture you're in, and how you yourself express that, I think, is more dependent on the influences of your social media accounts than you realise. So once you've gone through that, I want to do a bit of a case study on social media and your sexuality. So I want you to pick any social media feed, probably pick the one you use the most, whether that's Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, or TikTok, and I want you to go for a scroll. Okay, go for a scroll for about 10 to 15 minutes, and we're going to conduct the research method of observation. So what the target is I want you to count the number of posts that appear on your feed that are sexualized in any way. Okay, if it's I don't know, TikTok or someone dancing and their bodies are, bouncing all over the place, whatever it is, I want you to count the number of posts that you think are sexualized. Okay, so by sexualized, I want you to think intentionally using sexual behavior and playing on sexuality, as opposed to, like, say for example, I wouldn't say a family photo of a family at a beach and some members of the family in a bikini, some have their shirt off. I wouldn't say that that's a sexualized post. Okay, that's just a family out at the beach. But if we're looking at, a model biting her lip with hot chocolate poured down her face or something, I would probably say that that's a sexualized image. So the idea, I want you guys to be the judge of that, but I thought I'd give you a brief example. Anyway, once you've done that, I want you to tally the number on a bit of paper, and then when you're done, or you can even tally it here if you want, but write the total number after a 10 to 15 minute scroll. If you can, count I thought it would take you a while. No, just count the number of sexualized posts, and then we will, I guess, convert the number. So we're going to be looking at, so say if someone has 100 posts for a 15-minute scroll, that's how much content, and we'll work out how much content per minute you are seeing and viewing that is sexualized, and obviously that's going to impact your behavior. Once you have done that, what I would like you to do is list the potential reasons why, or any trends or commonalities that you notice between each post. So if you notice that all your or most of your sexualized posts, say for example, revolve around a certain gender, whether that's male, female, or other, have you noticed that most of your sexualized posts are of a certain job occupation? Are they from more so your micro world or your meso world or your macro? So what I mean by that are most of your sexualized posts from, say, celebrities or things like that you follow, or are they mostly coming from your micro community with your close friends, or are they coming from meso community with your, I guess, school acquaintances? So notice any trends or commonalities that you think are there, and then I want you to tell me why you think most of those posts are sexualized. Okay, so pause and do that. Once you've done that, we'll go to activity 2. Here is a question I want you to answer. Is there an overemphasis on sexuality in society, or is society's emphasis on sexuality an appropriate reality? Okay, so we'll break this down. So the first, you pretty much have to agree with one side of the question. Do you think there's an overemphasis on sexuality in society? So the idea that, do you think that society, so things like social media, music, movies, TV shows, all the sort of news that you're saturated with daily, do you think that society is putting that overemphasis of sexuality and sexual behavior on Western culture, or do you think that the emphasis that society is obviously putting on sexuality and sexual behavior is appropriate? So essentially here you're saying, do you think the sexual messages are too much, or do you think that they're measured and okay? Write your reasoning why. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. It's your opinion, but let me know there. Remember to fill all the lines. Last thing I want to leave you with is something called the LOL dolls. So these are toys that you can buy. I think you can get them at Kmart even, but they're kids' toys, and I guess I want you to look at the imagery that you're seeing here and deciding whether or not you think a 3, 4, 5-year-old playing with this sort of toy is promoting, I guess, sexual behavior in a positive or negative light. These LOL dolls themselves became really controversial because I'm not saying all the LOL dolls look like this, but the idea that what happened was that parents would buy these lol dolls and they would be dressed fine, but what ends up happening is if some of them, there was this like article that came out, and this parent found that if you got the lol dolls wet and saturated, their original outfit would fade away and you would be left with something like that. Okay, and that's a photo that one of the mothers took. So, I mean, if you don't believe me, look it up on YouTube. There's articles and tons of stuff on it. So have a gaze on that. And that's just a little interesting side note that I want you to look at later on to see if you think, again, that that's appropriate or not for kids. But that concludes our lesson on gender and sexuality, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.